Thank you for tuning in to Growing Tech Fast, the condensed podcast in which conversations about growing startups are had with those who have grown them. I'm very excited today to introduce our guest, who is currently the CEO of 3BL Media. It's Dave Armon. Good morning and welcome, Dave.
Hi, Connor. Great to be here.
Good stuff. Well, firstly, Dave, thank you so much for coming on. Obviously, yourself and I are very familiar to each other. But for our guests, I think it'd be great if you could give a quick intro of who Dave Armon is, and then a very brief overview as well, Dave, of 3BL and the work that you're doing there.
Sure, that's fine. Thanks. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at 3BL Media. I didn't start out in this sector, although I've always been in communications and media in my career. My first job was, I was a teenager. I was a traffic reporter on the radio in my hometown of Rochester, New York. And, it was the equivalent of going through puberty on the air. And it was embarrassing. My voice would crack and the disc jockeys would make fun of me, but it was a really great learning experience. I lucked into it, and it basically evolved into a job in media. Went to school for journalism. Got out, worked for a newswire service called United Press International, which was always plagued with money problems, and they went through two receiverships, Chapter 11, as we would call them in the States. And I learned, pretty early that the news business was perilous, but also really fun. So I jumped over to a service called PR Newswire, which was kind of this intersection between corporate news and the media and covering business. And this was 1989 when that happened, so pre-internet, and it was a lot of fun doing that for 20 years. I left in 2008 and been assisting startup SaaS businesses that are kind of in the same space, either MarTech or communication solutions that are used by corporations and help them grow awareness and track interactions and engagement with the brand.
Fantastic, cool. Well, as you said there, Dave, you've highlighted, I think, that extensive career. So going from a traffic reporter back in the day, I know we'll get onto you probably. You said you had a summer job, right, as a skippy truck driver. We've shared stories about that as well. So you've had a whole range, right, before becoming immersed into where you're at now at 3BL. But you just mentioned there, and I think it's something really interesting for our listeners. It's kind of everything in life is a learning experience, I think. You said you learned a lot from that traffic reporter role, for instance, as you were, just before you were about to start college. So just out of interest, Dave, could you elaborate a bit more on, I guess, what that did teach you and how that has maybe helped you through your career?
Yeah, one of the things about that job, Connor, that was interesting was learning how to pivot when things didn't go so great. The radio station that I went to work for first was called Waxy, and the ratings book came out. That's a period in the fall and the spring when back in the day the rating service, which was called Arbitron in the United States, the big global brands, I guess, are Nielsen and Kantar, but they would send out to the audience a little diary, and you'd have to list what stations you listened to. Waxy didn't do so well. They changed the format. They changed the call letter. They fired the staff, and I realized, wow, this is going to be a tough kind of a job to throughout my life if I want to be a breadwinner and raise a family and have stability. So I loved it. I went over to an all news station called WHAM News and Talk. It was the powerful station. And again, this is pre-internet. This was 1978. So they used to start the mornings by doing the farm report, and they would tell the farmers who were listening from their tractors at 5 a.m. What the price of soybeans was for the day, or apples, or pork bellies. So I felt very honored and lucky to be in that role, and it was right next door to the newsroom where this reporter who worked for UPI, Mark Frank, wrote a story about me being too young to drive an automobile, but telling thousands of drivers how to get to work every day. And then that story came out, and it was in a lot of papers around the country, even some international papers. And I realized, this whole syndication business of telling your story and then distributing it on a network and then having news editors opt in to run that story was really intriguing. And so that prompted me to go for print journalism to school rather than staying in radio. And as you can see, I have more of a face for radio than TV. I did have hair back in those days, but I made a decision that TV didn't feel comfortable for me. So I think the lessons learned were kind of just look at the whole environment you're in and the market you're in, and what's happening. Watch the money, watch where the dollars are going or not going. Yeah. And make decisions and see if you can, ride a wave or ride a trend, or get ahead of it, even if you're smart enough to do that.
Awesome. What a story. Can I find that news article?
Sure, I'll send you the article. That's
okay, cool. I look forward to reading that.
Funny story. It does refer to my voice cracking as I went through adolescence.
Cool. I think something else you picked up on there, Dave, which will be interesting given obviously the current climate we're in. It's probably become a bit of a buzzword, so to speak, but you said there the importance of being able to pivot quickly. I think a lot of businesses and business leaders and CEOs have certainly probably been talking about that over the last few months. So yeah, I guess just looking back over your career, any key tips around pivoting, I guess, whether it's observing when you need to, whether it's actions to take in order to execute pivoting, I guess, successfully? Yeah, any ideas and thoughts around that?
Well, I did experience that at PR Newswire as well. Like we felt a lot of threat throughout the years, 20 years there, from 1989 to 2008. When broadcast fax came out, we felt like, clients are going to be able to fax their press releases everywhere and we'll be out of business. But we started a broadcast fax service that allowed them to take their press release, put it on their letterhead and send it out to the 1,000 analysts that follow that company and get it to them within a minute of the press release going out. And that, not only did it protect the business, but it grew it by millions and millions of dollars. So, being fast and identifying technology and then personalizing it for your business so that, you could do one development project and serve thousands of customers rather than every single customer having to figure out how to integrate this thing. Ultimately technology catches up. The internet came out. We thought we were going to be toast when the internet came out, but then marketers realized how they would use press releases to tell their story and put it in a press release form to reach consumers, because no longer was the media the gatekeeper of the news. If you made a decision to put out a release, you would also reach consumers, which was really, really helpful. So pivoting, I guess, what happened with ultimately at PR Newswire is a lot of competitors came up and called themselves a newswire driven by the internet. Mm-hmm. And that became a commoditization problem where, it was difficult to say that even though we've been in business for so long at PR Newswire or our competitor Business Wire, there were these ankle biters, if you will, disruptors that were out there just saying, we do everything they do and we do it cheaper. And there's plenty of people that just didn't have the ability to do the homework or just wanted to take the deal. And that I think necessitated, pivoting into kind of what I'm doing now, honestly, is looking at a niche market that you can own and grow and build a brand in. And there's going to be enough revenue there for you to build a great business. So, that's what we do now. We do corporate social responsibility and sustainability news, the way Wall Street calls it, or the city, as you would say in London. Is they call it ESG, environmental, social, and governance news. And that has proven to be a very healthy area. It's growing. Employees want to work for a company that's a purpose-driven company that isn't just there to make money, but they're there to take care of the planet and people. And so we've concentrated on that. And while we're still a news distribution service, PR Newswire and Business Wire and services like that are kind of like an inch deep and a mile wide. And we're the opposite. We're just an inch wide, but we're a mile deep on the sector that we serve.
Yeah, cool. Well, lots of good takeaways there, Dave, particularly on the notion of pivoting. I'm sure our listeners really enjoy hearing about those experiences you had back in the day at PRN. But something you've just mentioned there, Dave, is obviously at the moment with 3BL, you've got a very niche market that you're kind of really dominating at the minute. And 2020 certainly, CSR, ESG is pretty prominent. Brands really want to be seen to be taking responsibility for putting a voice out on those issues. Out of interest, just from your perspective, when did you think you saw the rise of that? Because I think I can remember in my lifetime, it wasn't really on the agenda. And all of a sudden it seems to be this really big thing. So I'd be interested from someone inside the industry to see how you've seen CSR kind of develop over the past, 10, 20 years, whatever it is.
Yeah, it has been an evolution. I think in the beginning, CSR was seen as really just writing checks, philanthropy, really. And companies would support all sorts of not-for-profits and causes in their community. And it wasn't all that focused, quite honestly. And then there was an awareness environmentally that, that really, the president or the vice president here at the time was Al Gore, and he did an awful lot of education about climate change and the dangers there. And companies really spent a lot of effort at that time trying to, and this was under the CSR umbrella, not to pollute, to make sure you're not wasting water, to make sure you're using renewable energy, and to start talking about this and tracking this. And then there became an awareness. I think the third phase was kind of like holistically, if a company doesn't waste things in their, sorry about that, less than one when doing a podcast, turn your phone. If you're not throwing things away and you're taking care of the environment, it actually de-risks the company from an environmental standpoint. I mean, from an investor standpoint. You're not going to have some awful story about a toxic spill or something if you've looked at your supply chain, you've looked at your manufacturing processes, and you've figured out how to do a closed loop and take care of the environment. So I don't think philanthropy has stopped. I don't think that any of this has stopped, but it's all been kind of categorized under ESG now, and there became an awareness that Wall Street would reward you, and your employees would reward you, and the community would reward you, and it would build trust if you would do all of these things. So it's become a business imperative now, and it's very much at the center, at the board of directors level, where the board is saying to the CEO, if you hire more of a diverse workforce and you make sure that you have equal representation of men and women and you pay them all the same and you have good governance, we'll give you a bigger bonus at the end of the year. So by building all of these elements into the way that executives are paid, and by being transparent about reporting on all of this, it has just changed the way that business is done now, and that responsible businesses are seeing much better returns over the long term. Everyone was chasing that EPS number, the earnings per share number, with the quarterly earnings calls, and now there's actually a slide on the quarterly earnings calls for a lot of companies about their ESG initiatives.
Awesome. So as you said, there's kind of been, I guess, then this natural evolution, it seems, of CSR, ESG over the last decade or so, maybe
exactly. This company started 10 years ago, but predating that, there was a company called CSR Wire, and we ultimately acquired them. There was a platform that was very big in England that was also started in the US, but called justmeans.com. We acquired that company, and then we've been fortunate enough to have a strong subscription-based business that gave us the cash flow to kind of be opportunistic when there's chances to grow our business through acquisition. We bought Corporate Responsibility Magazine back in 2017, a conference called Commit Forum at the time. We now call it 3PL Forum, and we focus on brands taking stands. We acquired that. And then along with that deal, we also became the owner of a ranking. It's an ESG ranking called the 100 Best Corporate Citizens. Now, it's a thing pretty much in the States. We measure companies that are on the Russell 1000 index. It's kind of like your FTSE for good. And we measure them across all these ESG factors. But so that's, our business is multi-part now, but it is, it's all CSR related. And, we're about 30 people. We've been able to grow thanks to your help, Connor. You've helped us, beef up the sales team. And unlike a lot of companies, we're SaaS with service. So, instead of just selling a username and password and training a client on how to use the platform, which is a news distribution platform and all forms of content related to ESG. We do a lot of the work. We'll format the content and we pull the analytics and we write the social media tweets and get involved with the client around the content calendar. So it's proven to be a pretty exciting space to be in.
Awesome, cool. I want to dig in a bit more on that on 3BL and where you're up to and the growth as well around that. But very first question, Dave, something you mentioned there was brands taking stands. I'm always following it on LinkedIn. It looks like you attract some great guests. Have you met anyone like remarkable at one of those events? I'm not sure if it was that event or a different event. I think you met the CEO of Ben & Jerry's, for example. Was that
I did. Yeah.
Was it?
Yep. And Matt McCarthy, and he grew up not far from 3BL in Massachusetts, and they've been a purpose-driven brand forever.
Yeah.
But he did talk about just the need to be authentic and to push for the social change that the world needs. So yes, I've met some remarkable people. Absolutely, I met a guy named Anthony Haynes, who is the CEO of Toronto Hydro. And it was in the context of we gave away the Responsible CEO of the Year award. And he told me a story that, he had the audience kind of in tears about this one, but it was about how it's an electric utility. And when an employee of an electrical utility is out working on the lines, the electric lines, or I don't know what you call them in England, but the main, I guess, they have a risk of getting burned. Getting electrocuted or shocked badly, and this utility, Toronto Hydro, found that there was a research hospital in a burn unit in Canada that was doing research on this, and they had found a way to use stem cells to aid the recovery of burn victims. And he told this story on stage how they decided that they would fund all of this research so that the fatality rate was lessened sharply by this. And the condition was that the research could not be it could not be patented. It had to be open source so that any hospital burn unit could use that process. And Toronto Hydro funded that. And that's the kind of stuff that a lot of these companies are doing. There was another CEO who at the Brand Taking Stands conference talked about all the stuff that their company was doing, and yet an employee stood up during a town meeting and told the CEO, "That's all well and good, but we have an opioid crisis right now in our community. I lost my son. He died because of an opioid overdose. Why isn't the company doing something about that?" And this company, Leidos, which is a defense contractor, actually made that their cause. And they funded there's a drug that you can give someone who's had an overdose called Narcan. There's a technical term for it, but that's what we call it. And they gave it away for free to anyone anybody who's an opioid user or at risk, as long as they got training on how to administer this drug. And so it's just nice to be at the early stage of these things where the company is realizing like we're in a position to help well beyond just selling our products.
Yeah, absolutely. So many like heartwarming stories there. And already, as you said, so many brands already taking stands. And I'm guessing kind of looking to the future, I know you're very optimistic that this is going to be a really good niche for 3BL to be operating in and to be exploring, right? So I guess just digging in a bit more on that, Dave, being the CEO of a SaaS startup, a difficult job, I'm sure, in many ways, but also I'm sure rewarding and exciting. Just painting a picture then of where 3BL are at now, kind of, as you said, around 30 people. What does it look like in terms of growth for you? Kind of what are the plans for 3BL?
Yeah, I mean, we right now have mainly a North American business, Connor. We certainly have. We did acquire one company in England a few years ago. It was out of Canterbury or near Canterbury, and it was called Ethical Performance. And Ethical Performance ran a service that would allow a company to announce when their sustainability or their ESG report came out. And that service is called Report Alert, and we run that now. And so we do have quite a few clients from England, but we don't have any feet on the street there. We don't have necessarily the growing distribution network that we'd like to build there. So we certainly see opportunity for growth in markets where there's ESG reporting that is compulsory. the EU and some places around the world are ahead of the United States in that, where they're tracking greenhouse gas emissions, and they want to make sure that they've signed that human rights pledges, and that their supply chain is audited, and all of these things. So there's a demand for ESG content. We have a platform for pushing it out, and we plan to expand globally and to expand geographically in a logical way over the course of the next couple of years. We did this at PR Newswire, and that was quite successful. There's also bolt-on services that we're building out. A brand studio, for example. We acquired a business called Triple Pundit, which is it's a news site that's been covering sustainable business since I think 2004. And we have two products now under the Triple Pundit brand. One is an interview, kind of like what we're doing right now, with a journalist named Mary Mazzoni, who's our senior editor there, interviewing CEOs of companies about their work. Right, we did one recently about COVID-19, and how a company called Medtronic went open source with their ventilators, actually, at a time that the world needed them a lot. So, and then there's a sponsored series product with Triple Pundit. So we'll build out that brand studio. We'll continue to grow internationally. And there's other opportunities as well as more companies float green bonds. We're introducing a green bond alert product alongside the report alert. So we're on the hunt for talent, for sure, both in the the product development realm as well as the sales side, just to connect with customers and tell them what we do and why it's different than the DIY solutions they might be using now, and how it kind of dovetails with the work they're doing with their PR agency or marketing consultancy.
Of course, cool. Well, really exciting, Dave. I'm sure there'll be many sales leaders, business leaders listening who are on the similar goal track of wanting global expansion. Right? You've been there, you've done it before with PR Newswire. In your experience, what's the most, or let me rephrase that, sorry, what's the biggest challenge in global expansion? Why do so many companies fail at it?
Well, I think you look at your own expertise and think you know it all, right? And you helicopter into another market, and you find that things operate differently. It's the stuff you learned in school about in sociology class about ethnocentrism, right? So yeah, there is that big American ego that I think we just have to check and realize that we don't necessarily know everything. But there's also just capitalization, and it's just realizing, not to put the cart ahead of the horse. Make sure that you've got the financing to take care of your team well, and to take care of your existing clients well, and to just to keep running the operation professionally, and making sure that you're getting great renewals and servicing the customer before you get too diluted, knowing that I must grow, and then suddenly you find yourself, well, I wish I had 3 more service people, because our renewal rate has slipped because we got stars in our eyes about growing our business over in Australia or somewhere. So I think it's just logical, and slow and steady wins the race.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we're coming up to the end of time, but I can't not finish, Dave, without I was briefly looking at your time at PR Newswire, because that was a big stint of your career. Right? Was it 19 years? Yeah,
I was there 19 years.
So I guess a couple of questions here to dig into. Firstly, especially sort of my generation, 19 years sounds like a long time for someone to be at a company. Like, in this day and age, how it is. Keeping hold of top talent's difficult, right? So what was it, I guess, about PR Newswire that kept you there? Obviously you were climbing up and had a great career, but yeah, what was keeping you there?
I was engaged. I was respected. I felt like the business was dynamic, and there was always something new to learn. And we felt like it was a family environment. It wasn't just a job you'd go into in the beginning of the day, but you went away on conferences and training sessions, and you went to on client pitches and built out new product offerings. So I loved it, and I grew as a person there, and I think I relish the fact that a lot of the alumni are still in touch. One woman who works for us is running for mayor in a little town in New Jersey. Be the first person of color leading that community, and she wrote a nice video, or she recorded a video about, how supported she felt by her colleagues at PR Newswire who worked with her for all those years. So, I met great people along the way. We did a partnership with Mark Cuban when he started AudioNet, and then he turned it into broadcast.com, and then went public, and then sold it to Yahoo. And we sold that as a product. You could broadcast your corporate annual meeting over the internet, which was unheard of before that. So, as you meet these people along the way, you get inspired, you learn. You do get tempted to jump ship and grab onto their coattails. I think if I had to do it again, I probably would have done a better job networking instead of being so inward focused. I would have done that. So since PR Newswire, I've always mentored people, and I've always taken kind of any call that anyone wants to ask me for about career advice. And when I can, I'll help. So that LinkedIn has made that a lot easier to stay in touch with people, and that's an important part of what I do and who I am now. And I think if I did it again, I would have been a little bit more available. Let's put it that way.
Okay, cool. So I think there's one more question I want to quickly cover on PRN, and then we'll wrap up with a final question. But PR Newswire, Dave, just out of interest, what size were they when you joined, and what size were they when you left? I've not got a
Yeah, so I was the 150th employee, and when I left, there were, I think, a little over 1,000 employees. I think the bureau I was running, when we called them bureaus, so like a news bureau.
Yeah.
Was Cleveland. I think we were doing 300,000 in revenue when I started. And I think the company overall was probably doing kind of 30 to 40 million in 1989, and when I left, it was 300 million on the top line and $100 million in EBITDA. So it was, a really profitable business that continues, to generate most of a lot of the profits for Precision, who that's the organization that owns it now, which is private equity owned. So I think they have a great brand, and I'm happy to have been part of building it.
Yeah, that's an exceptional story, to effectively to go to a company and help them 10x and to end up, near the top of that as well. So if there's one, this will be multifaceted, Dave, but if there was one thing you could put that success down to that enabled you to grow at such a rate in terms of headcount and revenue, what would that be?
I have to say there were exceptional leaders at that company. The president, when I got hired in, was David Steinberg. Very smart man, and just a mensch, a person who would do a lot, would give a lot back, and be very honest with you along the way. Ian Capps was an ex-Reuters exec who was the CEO after that. There was a guy named Charlie Moran, who was tremendous as far as my career development, because he would mentor me and tell me, you don't have to make a decision in 2 seconds, Dave. Sleep on it. You don't be impulsive. But also just gave me plenty of rope and just said, go and do what you do best, and go meet with clients and go train colleagues and build the brand and make us some money and have fun along the way. And I think that was the reason it was so successful, is just you had people who brought you in and told you to get on with it.
Okay, so great leadership in a nutshell. Okay, awesome. Well, I think we could go on all day, Dave, but that's about all we've got time for. But one final question. I know you just mentioned there you're a great mentor to many people. I've probably...
Well, I didn't say I was a great mentor, but I try to mentor.
Well, I'll say you're a great mentor. You've certainly actually taught me a few things over our course of our relationship. You probably don't know it, but you have. And just in terms of, I guess then, Dave, whether it's business, whether it's sales, we get a lot of salespeople who'll be tuning in, and you're a former sales guy, right? If you could give just, one piece of advice to people that's really going to help them in their career, whether it's in sales or in business, what would that be? I think that'd be a really nice thing to leave our listeners with.
I think bring your true self to work. Don't try to be someone you aren't is key, and listening. Honing your listening skills and empathy skills, and try to figure out why the prospect even accepted the call. What's the reason why we're getting together today? What can we help with? And it may not even be the product you're selling, but you're building rapport along the way if you're having those conversations, instead of just immediately going to to shove your product down their throat. So it's really about building that relationship and listening, and hoping that there's some hooks in there that you can use to hang them later to sell them something.
Yeah.
But that's always been, I think, the strength of the people that succeed, is just being a human being and not reading a script.
Fantastic. I think that's a great way and a great note to end on, Dave. So thank you so much for your time today, for sharing with myself and with our listeners. It's been great to have you on.
It's my pleasure. Thanks a lot, Connor.
No worries. All right. Thanks, everyone. Until next time.